I thought planning our wedding would be stressful, but I didn't expect her ex to be the real problem. At first, it was small. Messages, quick calls. We're just friends. Then she started disappearing for hours and coming home with that guilty energy she tried to hide. My name is David Miller, and I'm a 35-year-old electrical contractor who thought he'd found his forever person in Amanda Collins. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months, and I was stupid enough to believe that meant something. Amanda worked as a marketing coordinator at a downtown firm, the kind of place where everyone dressed better than they could afford, and gossiped more than they worked. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made other men stare and made me feel lucky. Too lucky, as it turned out. The first red flag should have been when she started mentioning Jake Hayden again. Her college boyfriend, the one who dumped her 5 years ago to find himself in Europe with daddy's money. Suddenly his name was popping up in conversations like a bad song on repeat. Jake texted me today, she'd say, scrolling through her phone at dinner. He's back from his trip. Wants to catch up. I told her I didn't like her talking to him again. She smiled and said, "Don't be jealous. It's nothing. We're only friends." Famous last words, right? The late nights started a week later. "Work dinner," she'd say, grabbing her purse and kissing my cheek. "Don't wait up." But she'd come home smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine, and her lipstick would be gone. I'm not a suspicious guy by nature. I fix electrical problems for a living. I deal in facts, in things that either work or don't. But even I could see the circuits shorting out in our relationship. My best friend Troy warned me. "Man, she's acting weird," he said over beers at Murphy's Pub. "Lisa saw her at that fancy steakhouse downtown last Tuesday. She wasn't alone, and it wasn't you." "It was probably a work thing," I said, but the words tasted like lies even coming out of my mouth. "Work thing, my ass." The guy was holding her hand across the table. I should have confronted her then, should have demanded answers. Instead, I did what guys like me do. I hoped I was wrong and kept my mouth shut. The night everything changed, Amanda walked in around 10 p.m. with this glow about her. Not the tired look of someone coming home from work, but the bright-eyed excitement of someone who'd just gotten life-changing news. She was practically bouncing as she hung up her coat. Her phone had been buzzing all evening. I could hear it from the kitchen where I was finishing the dishes. "Good day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She turned to me with this smile that should have been for me but somehow wasn't. It was the kind of smile you give when you're bursting to share a secret, when something amazing has happened and you can't contain it. "Actually, yes. Really good." I waited for more, but she just stood there, phone in hand, practically glowing. The silence stretched between us until I couldn't take it anymore. "What happened?" She looked at me like she was sharing good news and said, "My ex proposed to me. I said yes." The dish I was holding, one of the good plates from the set her mother gave us, slipped from my hands and shattered against the kitchen floor. The sound echoed in the sudden silence that followed her words. I just stared, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to laugh and say it was a joke, that she was talking about some TV show or a story she'd heard. There wasn't one. "What did you just say?" "Jake proposed." And I said yes. She said it again, like I hadn't heard her the first time, like she was telling me she'd gotten a promotion or found a good parking spot. In that moment, standing in my kitchen surrounded by broken ceramic, I understood everything. I wasn't her future. I was her backup plan. The safe choice she'd settled for while waiting for something better to come along. She didn't just disrespect me, she'd replaced me entirely. "Are you insane?" The words came out quieter than I intended. "We're engaged, Amanda. We're getting married in 4 months." She had the audacity to look confused, like I was the one being unreasonable. "I know, but what? But you love him more? But you never really wanted to marry me? But I was just keeping your bed warm until Prince Charming decided to come back?" "It's not like that, David. You don't understand." "Then explain it to me. Explain how my fiancé saying yes to another man's proposal makes any kind of sense." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. "It just happened. We were talking, and he said he'd made a mistake leaving me, and when he asked, 'You said yes?' Yeah, you mentioned that part." The broken plate crunched under my feet as I stepped closer. Amanda actually took a step back, and for the first time since she'd walked in, she looked uncertain. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Time to think about what? You already made your choice." "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. You meant every word of it." I could see her scrambling now, trying to find a way to walk back what she'd said. But some things can't be unsaid. Some betrayals can't be explained away. "David, please, let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been cheating on me?" That every late night and work dinner was actually you planning your future with someone else? That our entire relationship has been a lie? She started crying then, but they were the wrong kind of tears. Not the tears of someone who'd made a terrible mistake, but the tears of someone who'd been caught. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't throw anything or punch a wall like guys do in movies. I simply walked to the living room, sat down on our couch, and started making a mental list of everything that needed to be undone. The venue would need to be canceled, the caterer, the florist, the DJ. My family would need to be called. Her family would need to be called. The invitations that had gone out last week would need to be followed up with some kind of explanation. Amanda followed me, still crying, still talking, but her words sounded like white noise. Something about not meaning it, about being confused, about how we could work through this. But saying yes to another man's proposal isn't confusion, it's clarity. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. First the wedding planner, then the venue. It was late, but I could leave messages, start the process of dismantling the future we'd planned together. "What are you doing?" Amanda asked, panic creeping into her voice. "Cleaning up the mess you just made." I didn't sleep that night. While Amanda cried herself to sleep in our bedroom, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and my phone, methodically destroying our wedding plans. The venue coordinator's voicemail was first. "Hi, this is David Miller. I need to cancel our wedding reservation for March 15th. Yes, I understand there are penalties. I'll call you tomorrow to discuss the details." The caterer was next, then the florist, then the string quartet Amanda had insisted we needed for the ceremony. Each call felt like pulling out stitches from a wound that hadn't healed yet. By dawn, I had a notebook full of phone numbers to call and a rough estimate of how much this was going to cost me. Turned out heartbreak had a price tag, and it was about $12,000 in non-refundable deposits. Amanda emerged from the bedroom around 7, looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were red and swollen. "David, we need to talk." "No, we don't." I didn't look up from my laptop. We needed to talk before you accepted another man's proposal. That ship has sailed." She sat down across from me, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. "I made a mistake," she said. "A huge, terrible mistake, but we can fix this." "How exactly do you fix saying yes to marrying someone else?" "I'll call Jake. I'll tell him I changed my mind." "And then what? We pretend this never happened? We go back to planning our wedding like you didn't just tell me you'd rather marry your ex-boyfriend?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but we can figure it out." I finally looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman I'd planned to marry, the woman I'd bought a house with, the woman I'd imagined growing old with. She was gone. In her place was someone who thought love was a multiple-choice question. "There's nothing to figure out, Amanda. You made your choice." "I choose you," she said desperately. "I choose us." "No, you chose him. Everything else is just damage control." I stood up, closing the laptop. "I'm going to shower and go to work. When I get home tonight, I want you gone." "David, please." "Gone, Amanda. Take whatever you need for now. I'll pack up the rest of your stuff this weekend." The shower was the first place I'd been alone since the night before, and that's where it finally hit me. Not just the anger or the betrayal, but the sheer absurdity of it all. I started laughing, really laughing, until the laughter turned into something else entirely. By the time I got out, Amanda was gone. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "I'm sorry. I love you. Please don't give up on us." I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. Work was a blessing that day. Nothing like rewiring a commercial building to keep your mind off your personal life falling apart. My crew knew something was wrong. I'm not exactly known for my poker face, but they had the good sense not to ask questions. It was around lunch when Troy showed up at the job site with coffee and sandwiches. "Heard you might need this," he said, handing me a cup. "Who told you?" "Amanda called Lisa this morning, crying. Something about calling off the wedding?" I took a long sip of coffee and told him everything. The late nights, the suspicious behavior, the proposal, the whole mess. Troy listened without interrupting, which is one of the reasons we've been friends since high school. "So what's the plan?" he asked when I finished. "Plan? Come on, Dave. This is Amanda we're talking about. The woman who threw a fit when the restaurant got her order wrong. You think she's just going to accept this and move on?" He had a point. Amanda didn't handle rejection well under the best circumstances. Having her fiancé kick her out after she'd essentially dumped him for another man? That was going to go over like a lead balloon. "I don't care what she does," I said. "It's not my problem anymore." "It's going to be your problem when she shows up at your door with some sob story about how she's made a terrible mistake and you're the love of her life. Then I'll tell her the same thing I told her this morning. She made her choice. Troy shook his head. You're underestimating her, man. Amanda's not the type to go quietly. He was right, of course. I just didn't realize how right until later that evening. I came home to find my front door unlocked and Amanda's car in the driveway. She was in the living room, surrounded by photo albums and tissue boxes, looking like she was staging some kind of intervention with herself. I told you to be gone, I said. I know, but I couldn't leave things like this. Look. She held up a photo from our first vacation together. Remember this? Remember how happy we were? I remember a lot of things, Amanda, including last night. She set the photo down and stood up. I called Jake. Good for you. I told him I couldn't marry him. I told him I was already engaged to the man I love. I stared at her. And he was upset, obviously, but he understood. He said he'd been selfish, trying to win me back when I'd already moved on. Moved on? You said yes to his proposal. I was confused. I was caught up in the moment, in the history we had together. But you're my future, David. You're the one I want to marry. It was a good speech. Heartfelt even. If she'd given it 12 hours earlier, it might have even worked. I already canceled the wedding, I said. Her face went white. What? The venue, the caterer, the flowers, all of it. I spent the morning cleaning up your mess. You can't just... We can reschedule. We can't do anything, Amanda. There is no we anymore. She started crying again, but this time it was different. Angry tears, desperate tears, the kind of tears that come when someone realizes they've lost something they can't get back. I made one mistake, she said. One stupid mistake, and you're throwing away 3 years? You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, and now I'm making mine. I walked to the front closet and pulled out 2 suitcases. Pack what you need for the next few days. I'll box up the rest of your stuff this weekend. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. Your mom's house, Jake's place, a hotel. I really don't care anymore. She stared at me like I was a stranger, and maybe I was. Maybe the David she'd known was the kind of guy who would have begged her to stay, who would have fought for a relationship that was already over. But that David had died the night before, somewhere between the broken plate and the realization that he'd been living a lie. Fine, she said finally. But this isn't over. Yes, it is. She packed quickly, throwing clothes into the suitcases without any organization. I stayed in the kitchen, listening to her move around upstairs, opening and closing drawers with more force than necessary. When she came back downstairs, she paused at the door. I'll come back for the rest of my stuff this weekend. I'll leave it on the porch. David, goodbye, Amanda. She left without another word, and for the first time in months, my house felt peaceful. I was naive enough to think that would be the end of it. I should have known Amanda wouldn't go quietly. I should have remembered that she was the type of person who needed to win every argument, who couldn't let sleeping dogs lie, who treated every conflict like a war that had to be fought until the bitter end. But I didn't expect her to bring reinforcements. Saturday morning, I was in the garage boxing up Amanda's belongings when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Through the window, I saw a silver Mercedes that I recognized immediately. My stomach dropped. Margaret Collins, Amanda's mother, was a force of nature in the worst possible way. She was the kind of woman who asked to speak to managers as a hobby, who treated service workers like they were beneath her, and who had never met a problem she couldn't solve by throwing money at it or intimidating people into submission. She was also the kind of mother who thought her daughter could do no wrong, no matter how much evidence suggested otherwise. I opened the garage door to find her marching up my driveway like a general leading a charge. She was dressed in what I'd learned to recognize as her serious business outfit, a tailored black suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. David, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, we need to talk. Mrs. Collins, I'm kind of busy right now. Yes, I can see that. She looked at the boxes stacked around the garage with obvious disapproval. Throwing away 3 years like it's garbage. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm returning Amanda's belongings to her. Don't be ridiculous. This whole situation is completely overblown. Amanda made a small mistake, and you're acting like she committed murder. A small mistake. That's what she was calling it. Mrs. Collins, with all due respect, your daughter accepted another man's marriage proposal while she was engaged to me. That's not a small mistake. That's a betrayal. She waved her hand dismissively. Men propose to women all the time. It doesn't mean anything unless you act on it. She said yes. She was being polite. I stared at her, wondering if she actually believed what she was saying or if she was just that committed to defending her daughter. Being polite would have been saying, "Thank you, but I'm already engaged." Saying yes is something else entirely. Margaret stepped closer, and I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the faint scent of cigarettes she thought she'd hidden with breath mints. "Let me tell you something, David. My daughter is a catch. She's beautiful, she's smart, she comes from a good family. She could have any man she wants. Then she should go want someone else. But she wants you, you stubborn fool. She's been crying for 3 days straight because you won't listen to reason. I listened to plenty. I listened to her tell me she accepted another man's proposal. I listened to her try to explain why that was somehow okay. What I'm not going to do is listen to you tell me I should be grateful for the privilege of being cheated on." Margaret's face was turning red, which usually meant she was about to escalate from intimidation to full-scale warfare. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," she said. "Amanda is the best thing that ever happened to you, and you're too proud to see it. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." "Is it?" "Because I've been thinking about this situation, and I have to wonder what kind of man just gives up without fighting for the woman he loves." There it was, the attack I'd been waiting for. The kind of man who has enough self-respect not to beg someone to choose him over someone else. "Self-respect?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're an electrician, David. You work with your hands for a living. You live in a modest house in a modest neighborhood and drive a truck that's seen better days. My daughter overlooked all of that because she saw something in you that, frankly, I never did." The words hit their mark, just like she'd intended. This was Margaret's specialty, finding the soft spots in people's armor and pressing until she found bone. And now she's willing to overlook this tantrum of yours too, because that's the kind of generous, forgiving person she is. But my patience isn't as generous as hers. "What's that supposed to mean?" She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me understand why Amanda had turned out the way she had. "It means that if you don't come to your senses and fix this mess, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are. The kind who abandons the woman he claims to love the moment things get difficult." "Go ahead," I said. "Tell whoever you want whatever you want. I'm done caring what people think." But even as I said it, I knew she'd found her target. Margaret Collins was connected in ways that mattered in a town like this. She sat on charity boards, belonged to the country club, had lunch with the wives of city councilmen and business owners. If she wanted to make my life difficult, she had the tools to do it. "Think about it," she said, turning to leave. "Think about whether your pride is worth losing everything you've worked for." She was halfway to her car when she turned back. "Oh, and David, Amanda will be coming by tomorrow to get the rest of her things. I suggest you be here to help her. It's the least you can do after putting her through this ordeal." She drove away, leaving me standing in my garage surrounded by boxes and the growing realization that this was far from over. I called Troy as soon as she was out of sight. "Margaret Collins just threatened me," I said without preamble. "Threatened you how?" I told him about the conversation, about her veiled warnings about making my life difficult. "She's bluffing," Troy said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Is she? You know how connected she is. One word from her to the right people, and I could lose contracts, recommendations, referrals. So what are you going to do?" "I don't know, but I'm not taking Amanda back just because her mother threatened me." "Good, because if you do, you'll never hear the end of it from me." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret's words, about the way she'd smiled when she'd delivered her ultimatum. Amanda had learned her manipulation tactics from a master, and now I was caught in the crossfire of a family that didn't know how to lose gracefully. Sunday morning brought Amanda and reinforcements. Not just Margaret this time, but Amanda's sister Jessica and her best friend Rachel. A whole delegation of women who'd apparently decided that I was the problem that needed to be solved. I watched from my living room window as they got out of 2 cars and gathered in my driveway like they were planning a siege. Amanda looked terrible, pale and thin, like she hadn't been eating or sleeping. Part of me felt bad for her, but a bigger part remembered why we were in this mess in the first place. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by aggressive knocking. "David, open the door," Amanda called. "I know you're in there." I could have ignored them, could have stayed inside until they gave up and left, but that would only delay the inevitable, and I was tired of feeling like a prisoner in my own house. I opened the door to find all 4 women standing on my porch like some kind of intervention squad. "We need to talk," Amanda said. "All of you." "We're here for moral support," Jessica said. She was 2 years younger than Amanda, but somehow seemed older, more sensible. Under normal circumstances, I liked Jessica. These weren't normal circumstances. "Moral support for what?" "For fixing this mess," Rachel said. She'd never liked me, had always thought Amanda was settling by dating a blue-collar guy. The feeling was mutual. There's nothing to fix. Amanda made her choice. I made a mistake, Amanda said, stepping forward. How many times do I have to say it? It's not about how many times you say it. It's about the fact that you said yes to another man's proposal. That's not something you can take back with an apology. Margaret pushed past the others. May we come in? This is hardly a conversation for the neighbors to overhear. I stepped aside, mainly because I knew they'd keep standing on my porch making a scene until I did. They filed into my living room like they owned the place, which, given Margaret's attitude, they probably thought they did. Now then, Margaret said, settling into my armchair like she was holding court, let's discuss this situation like adults. There's nothing to discuss. Of course there is, Jessica said. Amanda made a mistake, yes, but people make mistakes all the time. That's what forgiveness is for. Some mistakes are bigger than others. And some people are more understanding than others, Rachel added with a pointed look in my direction. I was starting to understand why Amanda thought she could get away with anything. She'd grown up surrounded by people who made excuses for her behavior, who treated her like she was too delicate or too special to be held accountable for her actions. Let me ask you something, I said, looking directly at Amanda. If the situation were reversed, if I'd accepted another woman's proposal while we were engaged, would you be this understanding? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Would you be sitting here telling me that it was just a mistake, that I was just being polite, that we could work through it? That's different, she said finally. How? Because you wouldn't do something like that. You're right, I wouldn't, because I understand what engagement means. It means you've chosen someone, it means you're committed, it means you don't entertain proposals from other people. She knows that now, Margaret said. She's learned her lesson. Her lesson? What lesson? Don't get caught? The room went quiet. Amanda started crying again, but this time I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her, no desire to make it better, just exhaustion. I think you should all leave, I said. David, please, Amanda said through her tears. I love you. I want to marry you. Isn't that enough? No, I said. It's not. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I meant it completely. After the intervention squad left, I decided I needed to know more about Jake Hayden. Not because I was jealous, that ship had sailed, but because I was curious about the kind of man who would propose to someone else's fiancée. It didn't take much digging. Jake Hayden had the kind of online presence that screamed, "Look at me." LinkedIn profile full of buzzwords, Instagram account documenting his entrepreneur lifestyle. Facebook page that read like a motivational poster factory had exploded. He was everything I wasn't. Trust fund baby turned tech startup founder, all expensive suits and networking events and posts about disrupting industries. The kind of guy who used words like synergy in casual conversation and thought wearing a Rolex made him interesting. But the more I scrolled through his social media, the more I noticed something else. Comments from a woman named Patricia Hayden, his mother, based on the shared last name and the family photos. And Patricia Hayden had opinions about her son's life choices. Strong opinions. So proud of my successful son, she'd commented on a photo of Jake at some business conference. Hope he finds a nice girl who appreciates what a catch he is. Jake needs to settle down with someone from a good family, she'd written under a picture of him at a charity gala. Someone who understands what it means to be a Hayden. The more I read, the clearer it became. Patricia Hayden was just like Margaret Collins, the controlling mother who thought her child could do no wrong. Except Patricia seemed to have very specific ideas about who was worthy of her precious son. I found her personal Facebook page and hit the jackpot. Patricia Hayden wasn't just opinionated, she was a full-blown social media warrior who documented every thought that crossed her mind. And lately, she'd been posting a lot about inappropriate women and gold diggers and people who don't know their place. The timeline matched up perfectly with when Jake and Amanda had reconnected. On a whim, I decided to send her a message. Nothing dramatic, just a simple introduction and some information I thought she might find interesting. Mrs. Hayden, I wrote. My name is David Miller. I believe your son Jake recently proposed to my fiancée, Amanda Collins. I thought you might be interested in knowing that Amanda accepted his proposal while she was still engaged to me. I've attached some screenshots of our wedding planning emails and her text messages that might give you some insight into the kind of person your son is planning to marry. Best regards, David. I attached screenshots of Amanda's texts to her friends about the wedding, including some particularly unflattering ones where she'd complained about Jake being clingy and desperate to prove himself during their college relationship. I also included a photo of our engagement announcement from the local newspaper, dated 6 months before Jake's proposal. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came faster than I expected. Mr. Miller, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I had no idea about Miss Collins' engagement to you, and I can assure you that my son was not aware of it either. This is completely unacceptable behavior, and I will be addressing it immediately. I apologize for any distress this situation has caused you. Sincerely, Patricia Hayden. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. David Miller? Yes. This is Patricia Hayden. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to speak with you directly about this situation. Her voice was crisp, educated, with the kind of authority that came from being used to having people listen when she spoke. Of course, Mrs. Hayden. First, I want to apologize on behalf of my family. What Miss Collins did is absolutely inexcusable, and I'm horrified that my son was involved in such a deception. Jake didn't know about our engagement? He claims he didn't, and I believe him. My son has many faults, but he's not typically deceptive about these things. Miss Collins, however, appears to be quite skilled at manipulation. I could hear the ice in her voice when she said Amanda's name. I've done some research on Miss Collins since receiving your message, she continued. Her family background, her employment history, her social media presence. I have to say, I'm not impressed with what I've found. Oh? Her mother has quite a reputation in certain circles. Margaret Collins is known for being difficult, entitled, the type of woman who thinks the rules don't apply to her or her family. This was getting interesting. I see. Mr. Miller, may I ask what your intentions are regarding this situation? Are you hoping to reconcile with Miss Collins? No, ma'am. That ship has sailed. Good, because I can tell you right now that any relationship between my son and that woman is absolutely not going to happen. Not if I have anything to say about it. I appreciate that, Mrs. Hayden, but honestly, what Jake and Amanda do now isn't really my concern. Perhaps not, but I suspect Miss Collins isn't going to accept rejection gracefully. Women like her rarely do. She was right about that. I have a proposition for you, Mr. Miller. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I think we might be able to help each other. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Patricia Hayden at an upscale cafe downtown, and I understood immediately why Amanda hadn't mentioned Jake's mother when she was talking about her bright future with her ex-boyfriend. Patricia Hayden was everything Margaret Collins pretended to be. Real money, not just the appearance of it. Real connections, not just social climbing, and real power, the kind that came from generations of influence rather than aggressive networking. She was also absolutely furious. I spoke with my son after we talked, she said, stirring her coffee with precise, controlled movements. He admitted that Miss Collins had mentioned being involved with someone else, but claimed she'd made it sound like it was casual, nothing serious. We've been engaged for 6 months. We were planning a wedding. Yes, I gathered that from the materials you sent me. Quite the elaborate affair you had planned. Had being the operative phrase. She smiled, and it reminded me of Margaret's smile, except this one felt genuine rather than calculated. Mr. Miller, I'm going to be frank with you. I don't like your Miss Collins. I don't like her family, I don't like her background, and I especially don't like the way she's manipulated my son. But more than that, I don't like being made a fool of. How so? Jake brought her to lunch last week, introduced her as his girlfriend, said they were talking about getting serious, made quite a show of how happy he was, how he'd finally found the one. I sat through an entire meal listening to this woman talk about her future with my son, knowing the whole time that she was lying to my face. I could see where this was going. You want revenge? I want justice. There's a difference. She leaned forward, and I could see where Jake had gotten his intensity. Miss Collins thinks she can play games with people's lives, treat relationships like they're interchangeable, manipulate men into competing for her attention. She's about to learn that some games have consequences. What did you have in mind? Nothing illegal, nothing unethical, just illuminating. You see, Mr. Miller, I have something Miss Collins wants very badly. Which is? My approval, my blessing for her relationship with my son, my acceptance into our family. She pulled out her phone and showed me a text message from Amanda. Mrs. Hayden, I hope we can meet soon. Jake has told me so much about you, and I'm looking forward to getting to know the woman who raised such an amazing man. When did she send this? This morning. Apparently Jake told her about our conversation, and she's now in full damage control mode. I had to admire Amanda's nerve, if nothing else. So what's the plan? Patricia Hayden's smile turned predatory. Oh, we're going to meet, and it's going to be very enlightening for everyone involved. Patricia Hayden didn't just plan lunch with Amanda, she orchestrated a masterpiece of social warfare. The venue was the Riverside Country Club, the kind of place where old money went to see and be seen, where conversations were conducted in whispers and reputations were built and destroyed over Caesar salads. She'd invited me to watch from the bar area, positioned where I could see their table but remain unnoticed. "Consider it research," she'd said. "You should see how your ex-fiancée performs when she thinks she's winning." I almost felt bad for Amanda. Almost. She arrived 15 minutes late, which in Patricia's world was probably equivalent to showing up drunk. Amanda was dressed in what I recognized as her meeting the parents outfit. Conservative dress, minimal jewelry, the kind of calculated casual that was supposed to look effortless but probably took an hour to achieve. Patricia, by contrast, looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread about powerful women. Everything about her radiated control, from her perfectly styled silver hair to her understated but obviously expensive jewelry. I couldn't hear their conversation from where I was sitting, but I could read the body language. Amanda was trying too hard, leaning forward, gesturing animatedly, smiling that bright, desperate smile she used when she was trying to win someone over. Patricia was polite but distant, the kind of distant that suggested Amanda was already failing whatever test she didn't know she was taking. Halfway through their appetizers, Patricia excused herself and walked to the bar where I was sitting. "How's it going?" I asked. "Oh, she's delightful," Patricia said with the kind of sarcasm that could cut diamonds. She spent the last 20 minutes telling me about her marketing career and her vision for her future with Jake. She's also mentioned 3 times that she comes from good people and that her mother is very involved in the community. Sounds like Amanda. She hasn't mentioned you once, not even to explain why she's suddenly available for my son. It's as if you never existed. That stung more than I'd expected it to. The interesting part, Patricia continued, is that she keeps checking her phone, seems anxious about something. Probably wondering if I'm going to cause problems for her. Well, you're about to. She pulled out her phone and showed me a text message she'd prepared. "Amanda, I've invited someone to join us for dessert. I think you'll find the conversation illuminating." "You're not actually..." "Oh, but I am." She hit send. Consider it a public service. She walked back to the table, and I watched Amanda's face as she read the message. Even from across the room, I could see her go pale. 10 minutes later, Patricia waved me over. "Amanda," she said as I approached, "I believe you know David Miller." Amanda's face went through about 6 different expressions in the space of 2 seconds. Shock, fear, anger, embarrassment, and finally a desperate attempt at composure. "David, what are you doing here?" "Having lunch," I said, sitting down in the chair Patricia had pulled out for me. "Patricia invited me." "Patricia?" "Mrs. Hayden and I have been having the most interesting conversations about you," I said. "Comparing notes, you might say." Amanda looked between us like she was watching a tennis match where she didn't know the score. "I don't understand." "Of course you don't," Patricia said smoothly. "You see, Amanda, when my son told me about his new girlfriend, I was naturally curious. So when Mr. Miller reached out to me with some concerns about your overlapping relationships, I felt it was important to get the full story." "Overlapping relationships?" "Well, what would you call accepting my son's proposal while you were still engaged to Mr. Miller?" The color drained completely from Amanda's face. She looked at me with something approaching panic. "David, I can explain..." "Can you? Because I'd love to hear the explanation for how you forgot to mention to Jake that you were planning a wedding with someone else." I told him I was seeing someone." "Seeing someone?" Patricia's voice could have frozen water. "Miss Collins, there's quite a difference between seeing someone and being engaged to be married." Amanda was scrambling now, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "It wasn't... David and I were having problems." "Problems?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Amanda, we were addressing wedding invitations the week before Jake proposed. What problems?" "You were distant. You weren't paying attention to me. I was working, that thing people do to pay for weddings and mortgages and the life you said you wanted with me." Patricia was watching this exchange with the fascination of someone observing an interesting science experiment. "Miss Collins," she said finally, "I'm curious about something. When exactly were you planning to tell my son about Mr. Miller?" I was going to... Because according to Mr. Miller, you accepted Jake's proposal on a Tuesday night. Your wedding was scheduled for the following March. That's quite a timeline to navigate." Amanda started crying, which in the past would have made me want to comfort her. Now it just made me tired. "I made a mistake," she said through her tears. "I got confused. I didn't know what I wanted." "Oh, but you did know," I said. "You wanted to keep me as a backup while you explored your options with Jake. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too." "That's not..." "It's exactly that, Amanda. You thought you could string both of us along until you decided which life you preferred." Patricia signaled for the check. "Miss Collins, I think we're done here." Mrs. Hayden, please. I love Jake. I want to be with him. I'm sure you do. Unfortunately, I don't want you to be with him. But nothing. You've shown me exactly what kind of person you are, and that's not the kind of person I want in my family. She stood up, and I followed her lead. David, Amanda said desperately, please, don't do this. I'm not doing anything, Amanda. I'm just not cleaning up your mess anymore. We left her sitting at the table, crying into her untouched dessert, while other diners pretended not to stare. In the parking lot, Patricia turned to me. That was illuminating, she said. She's going to blame me for this. Of course she is. People like Amanda Collins always blame everyone but themselves. And Jake? Jake will be disappointed, but he'll get over it. He's young, and there are plenty of women in the world who know how to tell the truth. She got into her Mercedes, then rolled down the window. Mr. Miller? Yes? Thank you for bringing this to my attention. And for what it's worth, I think Miss Collins is an idiot. She drove away, leaving me alone in the parking lot with the satisfaction of knowing that Amanda's backup plan had just evaporated. My phone started ringing before I even got to my truck. Amanda, of course? I didn't answer. The call started that afternoon and didn't stop. Amanda, then Margaret, then Jessica, then Rachel, then Amanda again. By evening, I had 17 missed calls and a voicemail box full of increasingly desperate messages. David, please call me back. We need to talk about what happened today. David, this is Margaret. What you did today was completely inappropriate. Call me immediately. Dave, it's Jessica. I don't know what's going on, but Amanda is hysterical. Please call her. David, you vindictive bastard. How could you do this to her? That last one was from Rachel, and it made me smile. I was sitting on my back deck with a beer, watching the sunset and enjoying the first real peace I'd felt in weeks when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Then another, then another. Through my kitchen window, I could see them gathering like an army preparing for siege. Amanda, Margaret, Jessica, Rachel, and, surprise, Jake Hayden himself. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but he was there. The doorbell rang, followed by aggressive knocking, followed by Margaret's voice. David Miller, open this door right now. I took another sip of beer and stayed where I was. We know you're in there, Amanda shouted. Your truck is in the driveway. The knocking got louder, more insistent. I could hear them talking among themselves, planning their strategy. Finally, the noise stopped, and I thought maybe they'd given up. Then I heard footsteps on my back deck. Amanda appeared around the corner, looking like she'd been crying for hours. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was a mess, and her eyes had the wild look of someone who'd reached the end of their rope. There you are, she said. This is private property, Amanda. It's my property, too. I lived here for 2 years. Lived, past tense. The others appeared behind her like a very dysfunctional parade. Margaret looked furious, Jessica looked uncomfortable, Rachel looked like she wanted to start a fight, and Jake looked like he wanted to disappear. We need to talk, Amanda said. No, we don't. Yes, we do, about what you did today, about that woman. Patricia Hayden? You had no right to involve her in this. I stood up, setting my beer on the deck railing. I had no right? Amanda, you accepted her son's proposal while you were engaged to me. You involved her the moment you decided to play games with her family. I wasn't playing games. Then what would you call it? Jake stepped forward, and I got my first good look at Amanda's great love. He was exactly what I'd expected from his social media presence. Expensive haircut, designer clothes, the kind of soft hands that had never done real work. But he looked miserable, like someone who'd just realized he'd stepped in something he couldn't scrape off his shoe. Look, man, he said. I didn't know about you when I proposed. Amanda told me she was casually dating someone, nothing serious. Casually dating? We were planning a wedding. I know that now. Do you? Because your mother seems to think you're still planning a future with Amanda. He glanced at Amanda, then back at me. My mother and I had a long conversation after lunch today, about a lot of things. And I think maybe I was being naive about this whole situation. Amanda spun around to face him. Jake, you can't be serious. Amanda, you lied to me. You lied to him. You lied to my mother. How am I supposed to trust anything you say now? I didn't lie. I didn't tell you everything. You didn't tell me anything. You let me think you were available when you were engaged to someone else. Margaret stepped forward, clearly deciding this was getting out of hand. This is ridiculous. Amanda made a mistake, but that doesn't mean... Mrs. Collins, Jake said, and his voice was stronger now. With all due respect, your daughter has been lying to everyone involved in this situation, including you, I'm guessing. Margaret's mouth fell open. She clearly wasn't used to being interrupted. I beg your pardon? Did you know Amanda was engaged when she started seeing me again? Of course I knew. But David was being unreasonable about... Unreasonable about what? About expecting his fiancée to be faithful? About planning a wedding with someone who was secretly planning a different future with someone else? I was starting to like Jake Hayden. Amanda was looking between Jake and me like she couldn't understand how her carefully constructed narrative was falling apart. "This is insane," she said. "I love you, Jake. I chose you." "You chose me after you got caught," Jake said. "There's a difference." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Because according to your text messages, you were still planning wedding details with David the day after you accepted my proposal." Amanda went very still. "What text messages?" Jake pulled out his phone. "The ones you sent to your friend Melissa about the wedding flowers, time-stamped 2 days ago." I watched Amanda's face crumble as she realized how thoroughly she'd been caught. "Jake, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You seem very good at explaining things, but I'm done listening." Confrontation on the deck. Jake turned to me. "David, I owe you an apology. I should have checked the facts first." "Apology accepted." "And Amanda," he continued, "figure out what you truly want instead of chasing everything." "I want you," she cried. "No, you want the idea of me, the life you imagine I offer. Not enough to be honest," Margaret fumed. "This is outrageous. Amanda's a wonderful girl." "She's 34, I said. "Time to expect her to act like an adult." Rachel defended her. "One mistake, David." "One? She's lied for weeks. Accepted another proposal while wearing my ring, deceived everyone." Amanda sobbed desperately. "I love you both." Jake shook his head. "You love being loved." He left, wishing her well without harm. The others deflated. Amanda, broken, whispered, "I really loved you." "But you loved better options more." She departed alone. I texted Troy, still breathing, finally free. 1 week later, Amanda moved back with her mother. Jake dated someone new. Margaret's complaints fell flat. I kept my house, business, and self-respect, learning that refusing mistreatment is the best revenge.